Hello, Rachel here. Welcome to my SlowTVStitchery. There's almost a moment when you come back to something like this where you can't quite work out where you got to. So I need to gather my scattered thoughts. You'll see I've made quite a bit of progress since last time, and there are one or two things that I have needed to start thinking about a little earlier than I really anticipated. One of those things is now I need to fix which colours I'm going to use for this border here. And if I'm going to fix and think about those, I should probably think about that so that everything in the borders is reasonably comfortably together. So I wandered around ideas a bit, but I thought in the end I should probably use the same blue in the, at least one of the same blues in the border as I have in the main piece. So I'm thinking the dark blue will be the dark blue that I'm using for the headdresses. After that I have a range of options. There's this bright turquoise, and there are various shades of the soie tramée. Now I'm probably going to use a couple of those in Nefertiti's dress, because I think I've decided the very lightest of these is the one that I'm using on Akhenaten's kilt, and I'm going to need to put in something to add definition. So when I come to Nefertiti I will put the definition in right then and there. However, whatever I do, I think I've decided that whatever I use for the thin lines here is going to go in the half circles here. And I think that might be possibly too definite. But I also have to choose which red. And I like both of them, and both of them have the right sort of feel. But I think I'm going to go for the redder one rather than the orangey one. Now if I use these three, I will be sticking with my Japanese flat silk, but I don't know that those two are sufficiently distinguished, especially when you consider that the stitches, being so close, tend to make the colour darker. Even the white is looking cream, if you notice. So not that one. That I think too dark. So maybe it's these. Yeah, probably those three. And thank you to the people who watched and then asked me questions, so I have something else to think about and perhaps even something to talk about. One of the questions with this sort of gold work is always going to be, what are you going to do with the ends? Now, classically and most frustratingly, the instruction in modern times is to plunge the ends. And as you get to the edge of a piece, there are obviously a lot of ends, and they become tangled and frustrating, and they make, if you leave it on the front, they make life difficult. If you put them to the back and plunge them in sections as you go, they make life difficult. And I did that with Christus Natus Est, and I swore I'd never do it again unless I was given a very good reason for doing so. No one has given me a good reason for doing so. So I think what I'm going to do in most cases, in fact, as I did right at the centre here, the centre isn't plunged. The centre is just cut short, whipped with the couching thread, and held in place very, very firmly so that it can't unravel. Now obviously in this particular case I then stitched over it with the silk because it's in the centre of a coloured section. So that thread is going nowhere. What I will do when I come to the edges, to some extent remains to be seen. But in the first instance, what I'm going to try to do is fold the thread back on itself and just keep it intact. Now, one of the reasons for not doing that is that as you fold it back on itself, it takes up a little bit of extra space, and it introduces unevennesses into the way that the gold thread runs over the fabric. But you can see that that's happening already, and I really don't mind in this context, because the unevennesses in the way the gold runs are part of what gives life and vigour to the whole design. It creates a sort of beaten, textured effect, and I think that's much more appealing than straight, perfect lines of gold, or in this case, perfect circles. You can see that the spiral is no longer a regular spiral. It's been swollen here because I couched the gold with gold, which I think is absolutely peak Egyptological embroidery. I'm quite proud of myself there. It's swollen here over the crown. It's beginning to distort around his body here. So it's not going to be a perfect spiral, but that's almost what I'm aiming for. So I'm content that as I get to the edges I start folding back on myself. It will create ripples in the gold, and I really think that doesn't matter. Actually, I would go further than that. Not only does it not matter, it's a good thing. There are going to be all sorts of strange little ripples because of the rays of the atom. But they'll probably get cancelled out by the whole atom itself. It's going to be a very interesting piece as it progresses. Making sense of what I'm aiming for. lots of sections with about 3 stitches in them. Never mind, I enjoy them. Just have to make sure I know which thread I'm using next. People also asked how on earth I see what I'm doing. My embroidery glasses are a more recent prescription than my ordinary reading glasses, and were prescribed with embroidery in mind, so they are a slightly shorter focus again, and I rather channel 7 of 9 by attaching magnifiers on the bridge of the nose. One of the questions on Facebook was, how much prep work do you do? And I'm not quite sure how to answer that one, because I'm not sure what precisely the question is trying to elicit. People who've read my blog may have seen at least some of the iterations the design went through, the different ways I rendered it. I copied the drawing, I did paintings, I traced it and retraced it and manipulated it in the computer. And that's an unusual amount of work for me. It's very rare that I have a design as well mapped out as this one. And even here, as you're seeing, there are things I haven't decided, things that I'm still thinking about as I stitch, and which will become more urgent quite soon as I get to them. For example, the border colours. So in this case, much more than usual, but prep work for recording. I have a camera on a tripod, and I've tried to make progress between each video so that it doesn't become too tedious for you, but at the same time the idea of these videos is just for you to have somebody companionable talking about something mildly interesting, perhaps while you're doing something else, so you can be as engaged with it as you wish, but perhaps see what I'm doing in a new way, in a new light perhaps. That's all for this episode. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed following along. Happy stitching!